after my second year of university, I spent working time at a summer camp. And coming back, I'd enjoyed it tremendously, working with the youth. I myself was quite youthful as well. But I just enjoyed the time of faith sharing and activity. We were on the ocean, at the beach, and it was a wonderful experience. And then one day I was reflecting on the Bible, doing my personal devotions, and I read the text from Hebrews that says, today, if you hear my voice, do not harden your hearts. And so this verse just stuck in my head, and it wouldn't let me go. It was more than my head, because obviously it was like an earworm, and I felt more and more uncomfortable hearing this voice over and over again saying, today, if you hear my voice, do not harden your heart. And so in some frustration, I went and walked around our house, and my father was sitting in his office, and I don't know how many times I passed, but at some point he came out of his office and asked me to come inside, and asked me, what's going on? Why am I walking around the house in this manic state? And I told him, and he sat for a long time puffing on his pipe. And then he said, maybe God is calling you. And that's really where things started.
I'm fascinated by the title of the book, Charles. Every time I pick it up and look at it again, I think it should be to the nations of the earth and not to the nations for the earth. Can you elaborate on your choice there?
Yeah, you've got a good point. One could probably say of the earth, and that is a theme I have. But I feel very strongly that our spirituality has to be a spirituality of mission. And so to the earth tries to signal the importance of our mission as human beings in creation itself. To the nations for the earth tries to say that we need to be for the biosphere, before God's biosphere that God created for us, and that we need to take our responsibility for it. Because we're not better than anything else in creation, but we are more powerful through our technology, through the way that we've been multiplying and spreading around the world. We have the power to destroy, and therefore we need to take the responsibility to look after it.
It's not an environmentalist book. It's a discipleship book. It's a missional book.
Yeah, and I've often wondered about that because we all know what to do. I don't think we need to make the case for that we are responsible for ecological change. That the case has been made. Most people understand and know that. So why aren't we doing something about it? Is my question. And I think the heart of the response lies in our discipleship and our spiritual imagination that calls us to imagine a better and different world.
And it may in fact be that it's our discipleship in general that's lacking, and not necessarily just ecological, but just what does it mean to be, Christ's hands, Christ's heart, Christ's eyes and ears in the world.
I mean, it's impossible to separate those things, or I don't think one should separate them. I think one of the things that motivated me was when you told me that the natural church development analysis of our Presbyterian churches show a lack of passionate spirituality, and I started asking myself, so what am I doing to talk about spirituality?
As you tell the story, it makes me curious about your own experience, your own story in terms of the difference between being an African Christian and now Christian in a Canadian context.
Yeah, of course, it's, having been in the Presbyterian Church in South Africa as a minister before I came here, there are some things that really aren't any different. On the other hand, I think within our culture in Canada and within the spirituality of the church in Canada, I found a bit of a divide between theory and practice that wasn't quite that pronounced in South Africa. In South Africa, nobody, no matter what their political stripe was, theological stripe was, whether they were more sort of leaning towards a liberal perspective or whether they're leaning more towards an evangelical perspective, nobody would question that one has to oppose apartheid and that you have to stand and be counted doing it, that you have to make sacrificial decisions about it. I found in Canada people were, I guess, less motivated around understanding their political responsibility as Christians. That it was actually a spiritual act, that it is a part of our spirituality to stand for justice and to insist on it. One is confronted in Africa, wherever you live, with poverty in a much more visceral way than you are in Canada. And that is, I mean, it's a good thing in Canada that we have less poverty, and we have much less poverty, and even our poverty doesn't even approach the wretched conditions people live under in even South Africa today, in some of the townships and shanty towns. So that's a difference, and one lives with that in your face all the time, and so you always have to think about what it means to buy something expensive, what it means to eat well. Can't help but remember those things when it happens. So I think that's one of the other differences I found. So I found it surprising that the American vision of this division between conservative evangelical and more mainline or traditional Christianity was so pronounced here, and how people allowed that to dictate their decisions and their way of thinking.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your book. And thanks for your friendship.
Yeah, thank you for the interview.